but I met a teacher when I was about 8 years old, and I was fascinated by dinosaurs, and I asked her to show me how to draw a dinosaur. And from that day, I kept just practicing what she had shown me, and I just fell in love with not just the ability to draw, but I was always fascinated by artists. And I would always draw, I would always sketch, I would always do paint by numbers. I would any opportunity I would get, even as a little boy, just to be able to draw. Colleague for Christmas gave me a palette, three colors, couple of brushes, and a canvas, and said, Biagini, let me see what you can do with this. Produced my first landscape piece, and 30, 40 years later, here I am doing the exact same thing that I did that.
So, how are you doing, Nick?
Hey, good, Gino. Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And it's obviously great to finally meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, likewise.
Excellent. So, we're obviously really excited today to learn a little bit more about your art, a little bit more about, how you got started, your history when it comes to art. Obviously, we've had some preliminary discussions, and I know that you have a little bit of a mixed background, as do I. So it would be also interesting to see how much of that, plays a role into your art. I've seen your art quite in detail. I've obviously reviewed it, and it's quite peculiar the way that you obviously focus or have a great focus in nature, particularly trees and stuff as well. But at the same time, you do all this mixed media stuff, and you have pretty cool like psychedelic colors as well, which is quite neat. So I'm pretty much all ears. I know that a lot of your artworks are quite different from the other, but at the same time, they have a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
So
All right. It's always, an great opportunity to be able to talk about, your journey. But mine pretty well stems from the time that I was probably about 8 years old. We came from Sicily, uh, and I was 5 years old when my father brought myself, and I have a twin brother, so he brought us, and went to a great school, not realizing how formative this would be. But I met a teacher when I was about 8 years old, and I was fascinated by dinosaurs, and I asked her to show me how to draw a dinosaur. And from that day, I kept just practicing what she had shown me. And I just fell in love with not just the ability to draw, but I was always fascinated by artists. And I would always draw, I would always sketch, I would always do paint by numbers. Any opportunity I would get, even as a little boy, just to be able to draw. I became fascinated with one of the cartoon figures here, Fred Flintstone, and I became famous for, drawing quick sketches of Fred Flintstone. But I would have to say that probably what initiated my more professional career, I became a teacher, and as a classroom teacher, I never really liked the art curriculum in the school. So I swore that I wanted to teach my students how to paint. And we started to produce our own paper on recycled paper, and we started to produce landscapes. And at the time, I wasn't trained as an artist. I didn't go to art school. So I would fake it, essentially. These students depended on me to show them how to put detail in a tree, in a cloud. And in the process of doing this over, several years, I saw not only a transformation in my students in terms of how the creativity translated into so many other areas of their lives, that I was also in the process of falling in love with just the smell of paint, the idea of painting. And then, after several years that I was doing this, a very good friend of mine, a colleague, for Christmas gave me a palette, three colors, couple of brushes, and a canvas, and said, Biagini, let me see what you can do with this. And I produced my first landscape piece. And 30, 40 years later, here I am doing the exact same thing that I did that particular Christmas holiday. And then, I became a school principal, and as a school principal, I was able to now promote art to the whole school, not just my class. So I was going in and I was painting with everyone from 4 years old to 13. Then that gave me the idea to start up Biagini's Colors, and it was an art school. And then the school board started to use me to teach other teachers how to teach their students how to paint. And yeah, the board made me the coordinator of the arts for 201 schools. So I was able to go around and just kind of promote my love for painting, mixed media. Um, and again, in the process, I was starting to find what I enjoyed painting. But I found that one particular style just didn't satisfy me, never satisfied me. So even if I would start to do an abstract piece, because I knew, abstract was kind of in vogue at the time, it didn't satisfy me because there was nothing representational. Even though I loved the colors, I loved the feel of the paint, the scumbling, the painting on dry paint, over layer upon layer. I needed to do something representational. So I would have to say that my first real project was to paint my town in Sicily. And I did some research and realized I was one of the only artists painting this town in Sicily. And I wasn't even from there. I mean, I was born there, but so a lot of the townspeople really loved the works that I was doing, and I was getting commissions and then shipping my paintings or putting them in a luggage, taking them off the wooden stretcher and selling them in my town to people who had already purchased them. And then that kind of gave me the impetus to continue, but I was always a product of how I felt at the time. So I got bored of just painting my town, so I started to paint Taormina, and I started to paint Cefalù, and I started to paint all these different places in Sicily that I absolutely loved, from the time that I was a child to an adult. Um, and then I just continued to paint, exhibit here. And then one of my sons he went to Ontario College of Art and Design University. And when he got in, I was so excited. It was almost as if I got in. So I was kind of living my artistic life vicariously through him in many ways. And then we started up again with Biagini's Colors, and we teach a lot of kids how to paint, and a lot of adults how to paint, and a lot of seniors how to paint, and it keeps active with a lot of the landscape, mixed media, screen printing, whatever it takes to just create. I think at the end of the day, with uh, with me, I just love when I'm in my studio, when I'm immersed in a painting. I know that artists will say that it's therapeutic. I don't know if it's therapeutic. It can be stressful, but more than anything else, it's enjoyable. I guess the fact that it takes me away sometimes, I guess that's a synonym for therapeutic. I don't know, but I don't necessarily use it for that. I do it because I want to produce something, and then I'm always fascinated by what I produce because, like I said, I never went to art school. In fact, one of the curators, I just had an exhibit. He said that my art falls under the category of outsider art.
Outsider art. What is it? What is the category?
Oh, I thought, wow, finally, after all these years, they can classify what I am because I'm an escape artist. I'm not an abstract artist. I delve into so many different styles but it's interesting. I had an exhibit, and a friend of mine was looking looking, and there were about 21 paintings being exhibited. They were all different styles. And he said, Nick, I looked from above down, and without even seeing your signature, I knew they were yours, all of them. So I thought, all right, at least there's something that defines them as being my pieces. But yeah, my tastes are pretty eclectic. So
Yeah, I mean I realized that as well, even though they're all pretty different. You use obviously it's a detectable definitely style, and the colors that you use are obviously somewhat, uh I don't want to say in uniform, but at least you can tell for sure that, that you can that they belong to you after seeing, multiple versions of your paintings. Um you answered actually quite a lot of questions in one, but I just want to kind of digest a couple of the things that you said. Um in terms of the town that obviously you within Sicily that you're from, and you drew quite a bit. What's the name of the town, and what was it about it that you like so much in terms of putting it on canvas?
yeah, good question. I mean, the town is called Gioiosa Marea. So translated, it means beautiful tide or beautiful beach. Um, and I was born in a beach town. So that love for free-spiritedness, being on the beach, living that lifestyle, never leaves you. But I guess there was always that yearning that because I couldn't have it close to me, let me try and paint it as often as I could so that I could have the image unfold in front of me as often as I could. So I started to paint, just panoramic views of the town, then street views of the town, then, the church where I was, baptized. And I think a lot of it had to do, obviously, with family. I had a great family, I had a great one cousin in particular who just loved the arts. He was an actor, but he also dabbled in a little bit of painting. So every time I would go to the town and I would pull out my paintings, he would always have first dibs. He'll say, "Okay, I'll take that one," and he goes, "Yeah, yeah, I think I'll take that one too." So he passed away, but whenever I go back to Sicily and I go to his home literally is a gallery of all of my paintings over the years that I've I had given to him, and it just brings back different memories. And because on the back I write, the dates that I started it, when I finished it, a few other snippets of how I felt at the time. So I'll pull them off the wall and I'll read something from 1999 and it just brings me back to kind of where I was when I painted it.
Quite interesting
Um
that you write when you started and when you finish, because you really don't get a lot of artists, writing both. Not to say a lot of the artists today, maybe take longer or shorter. I'm just saying that in general, it's not one of the things that you get in most of the paintings. Yet at the same time, it's such an important component because A, it tells you how long it took you from start to finish, and B, it also, tells you, what period of your life, you know, where you were allocated to obviously completing this, this piece of art. So I found that really, really interesting that you do that from start to finish.
It's interesting too because I'll have paintings that I did in 2001, pull them back out and continue to rework them and work them, and then I'll put another date of when it was finished, and then you realize that painting took 21 years
Yeah.
essentially to reach this point. So it kind of begs the question: is a painting ever finished, right? And then, I love art history, so I reading, Da Vinci and how long it took him to work on the Mona Lisa. And dealing with that, you realize it's not that he was working on it every day, all the time. You put it away, then you pull it back out. And that's the beauty of having experience as an artist. The fact that you have the confidence to be able to pull something out that you did 20 years ago and now see it with different eyes and being able to add a bit more detail and just to continue to build it.
Yeah, I think that's also a really valid point because I think a lot of people associate, a certain time frame of when, like, if you were actually having a start date and an end point, people have that association that, you're working on that piece 24/7 throughout this time, right? And I think there's a lot of mixed thoughts on that, but I think a lot of the kind of the movement's changed a little bit in the sense that obviously you now see, you know, incredible pieces of art that may have taken just 2 seconds, which at the same time you you have very impressive pieces of art that took years. But as you say, throughout those years, there were probably some days that it was just the person looking at the painting for hours and hours to figure out exactly what else is missing. So I think that is obviously a really important thing that you mentioned. I wanted to obviously talk to you a little bit more on the education side, because you mentioned that was obviously such a great component of your life, and given the fact that you work with kids, all the way from as young as 4, or I think you mentioned 4, even younger, to all sorts of adults and elderly. Um, what's been about, first of all, what about education kind of admire you to go in that direction initially? And secondly, what about art within education do you enjoy the most? And do you also take, some parts of that with you and actually portray it in your art as well?
I didn't always want to be a teacher. I know that I wanted to, at one point, I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was working towards that. But when I was, in university, I did a stint tutoring, and I realized I loved. I ended up getting a lot of satisfaction from helping these kids to learn something that they previously didn't know. But then, when I became a teacher, I didn't realize how innovative I actually could be. Um, I was involved in a lot of coaching. I coached, basketball. I was a long distance runner, so I coached long distance running. So I always swore that with my students, I wanted them to become academically strong, athletically strong, and also artistically strong. And that was kind of my impetus at the beginning of the year. And I would let the students know that these were the 3 areas we were going to focus on. And in order to achieve that, every Friday, no ifs, no ands, no buts, in the afternoon, we would set up our easels, and we would start off with, a painting, and then every week continue to work it. And you're looking at 30, 35 students, and you're helping all of them. But again, I watched some of the students who were a bit more challenging, and I found that as the year went on, every time it came time to paint, they would calm right down and focus, and they weren't distracted. It took 6 months, 7 months, but it happened. It happened to all of them. And some kids, because parents really liked what we were doing in the classroom, if I would move from, say, grade 6 to grade 7, a lot of the parents would ask if I could continue to take their kids in my class. So I was very selective in terms of the kids that I would continue to take on for up to 3 years. And I watched the development of these kids in, the academic components, the athletic components, but really in the artistic component. And kids to this day who will still come back and say, I still have all the paintings that I did in your class, and I still promote it to my own children because I saw the impact that it had in my life. Um, and then I see it, for example, well, and then I figured if I could do it with them, I was asked to teach in a very affluent old age home. And all my students were 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, um, and teaching them how to paint, and seeing how the dynamic changed. um, it was an interesting dynamic. They were no longer 90-year-olds. They were my students, respecting me as their teacher, uh, and always letting me know how it changed their life. Even at 90 years old, they felt that this was something that was a godsend, that it gave them this something to look forward to. Every single week, they would come down to the art studio and in their wheelchairs or in their walkers, and they would just be elated to have the opportunity to paint. So you realized that what you did in the classroom with kids, you were able to translate it into other realms. So it helped you to understand like the power of color, the power to be able to create. That it never leaves you. Like one of my students, he's 102 years old, and he's on maybe his 10th painting. And we just recently had an exhibit, and he sold four of his still lifes, and he was so proud at 102, still being so proud to sell a couple of his pieces. So it's not really, about the selling. It was more about that somebody wanted his work, like somebody, um, and that as a teacher gives you a strong sense of satisfaction in terms of what you do. But again, you realize the power of. And it made me also realize that it doesn't matter how many paintings you do, doesn't matter how many years you paint. It's one of those um, trades, so to speak, that you're always learning. You're always learning something new. And that's what inspires you to continue to paint. Because just when you think you've known it all, you start experimenting with different colors and you start to achieve something that you didn't think was possible. So
When you say
you love.
learning something new, do you mainly feel learning more about yourself in general, or in essence, or at the same time also about art, or a mix of both?
Yeah, about art and also about myself, because sometimes, I'll look at a piece and I think I just sometimes still can't believe I did it. I never had any training. It was all instinctual. It was all innate. It was just something that I absolutely loved from the time that I was a little boy. And I don't know why. Maybe it was a bit of an arrogance that I didn't go to art school, or maybe intimidation as well. I thought there's so many individuals there that are so much better than me. I didn't want to expose myself to that. So I thought, let me experiment, develop my own style, and this way I don't have to deal with that feeling of there's somebody else there better than me. And then you realize with life in general, that's what it's all about. There are going to be people who are better than you, and that's what makes it more purposeful, because it makes you strive to want to try and achieve that level of art. I mean, I look at Anselm Kiefer's work. I love his work. I'm always trying to strive to achieve that ethereal effect that he has. I always admire so many artists. I mean, I love Francis Bacon. I loved his style, and I was inspired by the fact that he was pretty well self-taught for the most part. Um, his studio was a mess. So, I look at mine, I think, okay, at least there are other artists. Uh, because, with him, it was all about, he just wanted to hurry up and get color on the canvas. He didn't want to take too much time to prep. And I'm the same. I find I just can't wait. When I'm down here,
Yeah.
I just wait to start painting.
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah,
a
I know
little.
that feeling, right? When you just go down and you just rip off the canvas and you just, you forget to even like put padding on the wall sometimes, right?
I just, yeah, this is what you were born to do. Like, I think in hindsight, I would have liked to have, gone to art school, but my father wouldn't have approved it. He wanted, from the time that I was a little boy, it was always do this, and then you got to put all these things away and do something noble with your life, right? So I did, but at least it allowed me to do both.
Do you think
I
that's
was.
still a little bit the same in modern day? Because I've heard that many times before, and I can totally imagine that. But do you think that's changed to some extent today? That obviously you have, parents been a little bit more encouraging from the get-go and not taking art, as a kind of starving artist mindset per se, on that front.
Well, I mean, I had stated earlier that I have my son. When he got into Ontario College of Art, like I know that for the longest time when, my boys were little, they would always sit at the table with me and do whatever drawing, painting while I painted. So they were always exposed to it from the time they were little. When they went off to high school, they stopped, they didn't take art. But then one of my sons, when he was in grade 12, he was 17 years old, he decided to take art. Next thing I know, he was coming home with these 36 by 48 life-size self-portraits, beautifully rendered. And he says, Dad, I just absolutely love this. And he was producing them. And then at the school, they gave him the, art award, and when he applied to the Ontario College of Art and Design University, I remember going with him with his portfolio. When he got in, it felt like I was so proud of him. And now he's, full-time artist. We run the art school together, and I couldn't be more proud. I in the beginning supported him more. Now, he pursues it in a much more professional way, with gallery visits, and he knows different gallerists and he knows designers, and so I'm also inspired by how he approaches the art business, and it has helped me. Do I, regret that? Should I have pushed him on to become? No, you're right when you say it's a different generation. I think parents are definitely a lot more accepting of whatever their children want to do that make them happy. That's it. Like,
Yeah, I totally agree. And many other changes, right? I would say not all maybe for the good in modern day. Some for the good, some I guess you could argue otherwise. But I think from an artistic standpoint, 100%, I think it's well, not only I think not only in terms of mindset, I think also in terms of opportunities for artists, as opposed to before. There's more ways to obviously showcase your artwork, online, maybe also in digital format as opposed to before. Does that have cons? Yeah, you could probably argue that as well. But I think for the most part, there's a broader pool of opportunities, obviously for artists. One of the things that I also wanted to ask you, Nick, in terms of the education side in conjunction to art, you mentioned that, you saw a lot of these kids, uh, you know, kind of outgrow themselves and really grow through art in many ways. And you mentioned the same thing, for some of the elderly ones that you worked with. Um, what was mainly the basis of that measurement back in the day? Was it mainly the type of work that they created? Was it kind of the artistic techniques that they implemented in their art, or was it a whole range of different things that obviously supplemented their personal identity in an educational standpoint, if you will? Because I think that one of the things is within art itself, and particularly in schools. I mean, there's always been art in schools, but it's always been kind of that extracurricular, supplementary, optional kind of thing, if you will, and um, and it's not always been so well integrated into other topics. And I think a lot of that's been undermined, still is undermined to a certain extent. But I wanted to get more insight as to how it was for you that had more of a hands-on experience, not just with kids now, but obviously with the elderly.
yeah, no, when I like I said, when I had gotten into teaching, I looked at the art curriculum and I thought I have to teach this art curriculum, but it was all more arts and crafts. It wasn't the kind of art that I thought. It was like a one-off, and then they would move on to something else. It was very, kind of cookie cutter type art. And then the other thing was, I thought anybody can do this. So I didn't want to teach them what just anybody can do. I wanted to teach them a specialized type of art. And like I said, we had a whole production line. I started to produce this paper. Uh, Let me just see if I have
Yeah.
very quickly. So this was kind of like the paper itself.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah.
So this was just this is a very very old piece, but I started to become more of a bit more environmentalist. So I thought, how can I incorporate that into art? So I taught the kids how to make paper. So then we had a whole production line, and I thought, okay, what are we going to do with all this paper now? Um, let's use it to paint. Um, and because of the textures on the paper, the paintings themselves took on a life of their own. It was absolutely incredible. But what I found to be most powerful with the whole process in the end was that I was able to, I was able to incorporate it into math as well. I was able to incorporate it into language because now the kids had an opportunity to describe how they were able to achieve this painting. And because they were the ones immersed in it for several weeks, they were able to write about it without even thinking about it. They were able to write about it fluently. So even kids who struggled with writing, this at least gave them a platform to be able to write something. And in the process, it was strengthening their ability to write. With math, some of the kids wanted to get more precise. So I taught them how to grid their canvas, and they would start to take their time to grid it and draw out, as much detail. And again, even with that, it made different personalities come out. So you had those students who were a bit more linear; they had to do it more precisely. So they would take the time and they would grid it. The other students who were more or less say fair and wanted to just create a boundary line and then go away and focus more on colors. Um, and then once we started to get into more abstract and they started to gain more experience, they thought, let's experiment with purple trees and a green sky. And they started to look at that as being a normal part of their art development. So they were delving deeper into surrealism and abstract, and then we would study it. Then they would study. Uh, um, I just found that it was more than just the art. It taught them how to concentrate. It taught them how to focus. It taught them how to be patient. It really taught them how to be patient. And then, because I always thought about as a teacher, how can I teach them life skills that will be practical? So once I knew that with the art, they were starting to develop focus and patience. Then I started to I introduced a pretty formal debating program in my classes because I knew that some of the kids were so quick to jump out and interrupt, and because of the focus, because of their ability, now they were starting to write better. We introduced a debating program that I used for 20 years as an educator, and it was simply an extension of what they did with the art. So my classroom wasn't just about structured curriculum, sitting at the desk, giving them the work. It was all about engaging and being involved in the whole learning. And in the process, I was also learning. So I always thought, even when, with my long distance runners, I wouldn't just give them, the workout. I would do it with them because I figured, why should they have all the fun? So I was immersed for all the years that even as a principal, um, I had an art club, so I had kids at lunch hour, come to a particular room and they would paint with me. And the off days, we'd have a running club. So we'd be outside running with 200 kids that otherwise might be in the schoolyard causing trouble. But now we're running and training and becoming pretty good athletes. And so it was all about trying to uh, if I'm going to be there, let's do something meaningful that is going to help me and it's going to help you. And the art was nothing more than an extension of my personality, and I wanted to share that with all the students who were in my class. And thank God I had an opportunity to do that and see the effects of it. Like I could literally write a book on the impact that it had on so many kids.
You
And
should. You
to
should
this
definitely, Nick. And do you feel, by the way, I know that obviously to a certain point, I think art in it's still pretty undermined in many different schools and curriculums and everything like that. Do you feel that you know um, modern day education should become a lot more aware of the impact that art has, and particularly on children?
Absolutely. I used to always say school should be broken up into four components. That's it. A math component, a language component, a physical education component, and an arts component every day. Every day. All the other stuff, the science, the social studies, the geography, that can be, I always said it can be embedded in, the language component and give that a structure. But art every single day, what a difference it made in the lives of my students. And uh, most schools, Friday attendance always drops. My kids were in class every single Friday because they knew they didn't want to miss painting. They didn't want to miss painting. They loved it.
That's awesome.
We
Yeah.
put on our music, and it got to the point where in the beginning it's viewed as an opportunity to have a break until they realized it was work. And then by December, you could hear a pin drop in the classroom because they'd be so focused on their painting. And it's not like I had to warn them or I had to, no, they just loved the process of being, they would chat with but they realized very, very quickly that it was very difficult to talk and paint at the same time, that they had to focus.
Yeah.
When they stopped, they would carry on, a conversation, but then would get back to their painting.
Ha-
So,
Have you had any kids? And by the way, I also wanted to ask you if you have any art still from a lot of the kids that you worked with. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, have you had any of the actual kids, after all these years, come back to you or that you've met before, and brought remembrance of that art memories that they had along with you, and what impact it had on their lives at such a young age?
it's incredible. I still run into so many students, and so many of them have become my friends.
Yeah.
They'll always talk about, they don't talk about that math class or that language class, but they'll always say, "Hey, Biagini, I still have all your paintings." And, they're all still involved in staying in shape, at high levels. I have kids who've run marathons, but all of them will always bring up those two areas. I have a couple of students who went on to become lawyers, and they always attribute it to the debating. Said, I learned, the art of stopping and listening in your class. And by the time I got to, law school, I was already, I was ready in high school to be able to, challenge certain discussions without being abrupt about it. Being able to stop, listen, analyze, and then being able to give my rebuttal. But yeah, I still, and a lot of the pieces, I have an attic. I have a couple of pieces from students, but very few because they kept them all. Like they loved the work that they did. And I would always more often than not in the beginning, I would sit down and I would work on their painting on one section just to demonstrate how, and then I would leave them and then they would start to work on. And that's kind of the process that I taught them. I would demonstrate. I would never just leave them to their own device because at the end of the day, their goal was to produce a professional looking painting. It
Yeah.
was about light and shadow and something that would be visually appealing. So yeah,
What
they learn.
what is it about the whole process that that you enjoy the most, both from an artistic and educational standpoint, and then also what is something that you're still looking forward to, either implementing today or also still doing today on from a career standpoint within this area that maybe you've always wanted to do, but you obviously haven't had the chance of doing yet.
Well, I thank God that once I retired, my reputation was still um, so a lot of schools, a lot of my colleagues will book me throughout the year, and I go into their schools, and I have a whole group of artists now that, and many of them came up through our through Biagini's colors, and they learned kind of the style that I like to use in order to teach. But we're in so many schools throughout the year. We take a bit of a break in the summer, July, August, but come September, we've got lunch programs going, have after school programs going, and then I also have the workshop. So, Christmas paintings, I have, 10 schools that will contact me and want me to come in, and I stand in front of the class with my canvas. All the kids have their canvas with an easel, and we produce Christmas paintings, or we produce Thanksgiving paintings, or we produce Easter paintings, and sometimes they'll book, stuff with plaster, so it's over a couple of days. So I still thank God I have the benefit and the luxury of being able to go into schools and now teach what I did in my own class to so many other kids. Yeah, I'm definitely blessed. And again, it's a specialty. So a lot of teachers or principals will reach out to me and say, we're going to have an art gallery in May. We want to start to produce paintings. And because my schools were always notorious for the spring art gallery, we would transform the gymnasium into a huge gallery, and all the paintings by all the students throughout the year are, curated and hung properly in the gym, and parents come and trustees and local politicians and yeah. So I thank God I never went to art school, and now I'm teaching, adults who have gone to art school, but want to learn a little bit more about screen printing and how do I, create, you know, that effect on a painting. So, so I thank God I have the opportunity to be able to do that, and people trust me with that.
Did you have, I meant to ask you this actually more towards the beginning, but I wanted to also make sure because with Italy and having such a history within art, and I know that you mentioned some of the figures before, but did you have any sort of inspirations within the art world since you were little? And if so, does your art resonate with any of those in particular?
Yeah, I had a great aunt who has her paintings in one of the museums in Palermo in Sicily. And all the cousins, everybody has, one of her paintings, or she did clay sculptures of roosters with all these details. And I found that whenever we went back to Sicily and I would see her work, um, I was always fascinated by how she could do that. I didn't understand the process of how you can do that. How can you translate these colors to create this image onto a canvas? That's something way beyond anything that I can do. And then when I started to do it, so when I went back to Sicily the last time, her granddaughter, I left her two paintings, and she'll always say, you remind me a lot of Zia Caterina because she had the same. Every time you went to her house, her hands were full of paint, or she had a cloth wrapped around her for her brush. You've adopted kind of that lifestyle, that mentality. So if I had to say that was anybody, it would have been her. But from the time that I was, even in high school, I was always fascinated by the life of artists. I loved reading about Monet, Modigliani, oh, everybody and anybody. I read biographies of, Michelangelo, Da Vinci. I love, a lot of current artists, Damien Hirst, all these guys, Hockney. So I'm always inspired by what they do. I love like Eric Fischl. I love the effects of light. Um, yeah, Peter Doig. Self-taught. Francis Bacon. So I'm always attracted to whenever I read the biography of an artist and I see he was primarily self-taught. Marcel Duchamp. I think, wow, I'm in good company as an outsider because I never studied it. But if you put your mind to something, you can definitely over time learn it.
Do you think that the people that do study art, and I think that's probably important question for a lot of those that fall under both categories, right? Because from one end of the spectrum, you have people that obviously paid a lot, to go to art school and to learn, and are obviously really appreciative of, what they've learned and how much of that they've been able to apply into their artworks. On the other side of the spectrum, you have some really famous artists that didn't go to art school whatsoever, and maybe not to generalize or stereotype by any means, but most or not most of the time, but many of the times they become sometimes actually more successful than those that did go to art school. Um, do you think that that for those that didn't go to art school, that kind of find themselves, creating really spectacular pieces of art, you think that fact of not going to art school played, somewhat of a role in their own inner creativity, if you will? And do you also think art school on one end also, because a lot of people have talked about this, and there's been several mixed topics on this, that, it creates a little bit, I don't want to say a limitation, but it gives you a little bit more structure in terms of how to create things as opposed to just letting your own inner guide, fill in the dots.
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I find that one of the main reasons why I never even pursued it when I could have gone was I didn't want to be influenced by somebody else's style. I wanted to really find my own style. And I thought the only way that I could genuinely do that was to, start to create my own, analyze them, and then decide how can I make this better? Like, what can I do on my own? And I think that whole reflection, that thought process, allowed me to become a much stronger, more confident artist because I had to figure out a lot of things on my own. So having said that, I also think if I had gone to art school, I look at, for example, my son Lucas, who he went to art school, and I see when he mixes his palette and the oils that he uses and how loosely he works. And he got that definitely from art school. So there's pros and cons to both. I just think if I'd gone to art school, I would have been spending those years in university doing what I loved for the most part, as opposed to, having to sit in some of those classes that I just did not want to be in. But I did it because I was conforming and I figured this is what I have to do. This is what my father wants me to do. So I became complacent and I did it. If I had gone to art school, I would have been doing what I loved. So I guess there's pros and cons to both. In hindsight, though, I'm glad I didn't, only because, like I said, it allows me to analyze and fix and correct and not settle for what I've done. Always constantly striving. How can I make it better? And I'll experiment with different colors just to be able to kind of create the effect that I have in my head. I think it's forced me to exercise more creativity by learning on my own. I mean, there would be those who would argue, but to each his own. I like it. I like the fact that I created my own style. I think sometimes though, what art school might have done for me might have allowed me to stick to one style and that's it. Right? That's what it most likely would have. Uh,
Do you think that's in and of itself,
yeah,
to some extent, a limitation for
yeah,
maybe some of the artists that are actually do go to art school?
yeah. I think it is because in this quest, to try and always improve, I've dabbled into different styles of art. I mean, I love screen printing. I love the process of screen printing. I love to create my own screens, something that I'm still learning. I love photo transfers. Um, and the whole process of kind of ripping paper off the back. Um, I love the more technical. If I'm doing a commission, making it more precise. I like being able to have the flexibility of uh, creating a painting based on how I'm feeling, and then the purpose of it as well.
Going with the
Uh,
flow, basically, to some extent.
yeah,
That's good. Well,
yeah,
I just want to say before anything else, I really, really appreciate, and I think it's been great to learn from you just because you've had such a unique background. I don't think, to be fair, I don't think or maybe one other artist, I don't think I've talked to somebody that's so integrated, not just in the art scene, but also on the educational front. I think that's first of all really admiring, and it's good to hear so much insight from that angle because you don't generally get to talk to a lot of people that are so well integrated into art, but also through education. I wanted to just ask you kind of some closing questions, Nick, based on the conversation that obviously we've had today. What do you think is the most kind of misinterpreted thing about when it comes to art? You've had obviously so much involvement within the educational system, the curriculum, both from young, kids to the elderly. What do you think out of everything that you've seen around? What do you think is the most I don't want to say undermined, but m mainly misinterpreted thing about art?
I think once you put so much focus on wanting to sell your art, then I think you start to compromise with what you really want to produce. And I know that a lot of artists will do that, and everyone has to make a living. And I thank God I was never in a position where I relied on that for my livelihood. But I'll tell you, when I stopped focusing on producing art that I wanted to sell, I started to sell more. It was when I started to, kind of move away from that. So I think, artists need to focus on just creating and producing what they love to do as opposed to compromising and producing what somebody else may like, but you're not enjoying doing it. I know, for example, sometimes I'll be working on a commission for someone. Recently, I just did one, and I did not enjoy it. I hated it. It
Yeah.
was the very first time that I could honestly say that I did not look forward to coming downstairs, even though, she loved the painting and it was to a certain extent, enjoyable in some ways, but not at the same level as when I'm producing something that I want to produce, regardless of whether it sells or not. And most likelihood, I'll end up keeping it for myself anyways. But I hope I answered your question.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not sure.
absolutely. And in terms of that, the commission side of things, I get that a lot because I get, well, actually, some artists don't even do commissions. So they'll say, listen, if you want one of my paintings, I'll create it for you. If you like it or not, that's totally up to you. Otherwise, you can choose from those that I have in stock. So I've heard that. I've heard both sides of the story. If somebody else would have had your paintings, whether it's 50, 100 years from now, and they were to look back and say, this belonged to this artist. He was also a school teacher. He did this and that. What would you, as an artist, and equally so as obviously as a teacher, based on everything that you've done within the art spectrum, would you like to be known for in terms of not necessarily like legacy in general, but if we were to see kind of your piece on the wall, what would be something, whether it's a word, a sentence, or this was Nick Biagini, he was known for X, Y, Z, and that was his style, et cetera, and this is what he did.
Great question. I think in the end, if someone could look at my paintings and say, this was a guy who was in love with painting, who was in love with the act of creating, um, and just thoroughly, for the most part, enjoyed uh, every stroke or just the opportunity to be able to paint. Honestly, I think God could give this gift to whoever, but He doesn't. And the fact that He gave it to me, I feel blessed every single day. I love just the act of painting. I want to be remembered as yeah. In fact, in this neighborhood, everybody's got nicknames, and my nickname is Nick the Artist. And I love the fact that I'm known, in spite of the fact that, in the community, I was a very well respected principal, and, other areas. I've been heavily involved in basketball, but everyone knows me as Nick the Artist. So I love that that part of who I am. And if I ever want to be remembered for anything, anybody hanging my paintings, it was, yeah, this guy was a true artist. Just loved the whole act of painting and creating. That's it.
That's awesome. Perfect. And
Okay.
everything's really been amazing, Nick. I just wanted to say the last thing I wanted to let all the viewers, obviously, that are watching, if they want to obviously get more details, not just about yourself, but about your painting, and if they're indeed interested in some of the paintings, if you want to share any of your website and of course your IG handle or any other kind of channels that where they can, contact you or interact with you
Mhm.
on this front.
Well, the my Instagram is where I usually post most, and it's at underscore Nick Biagini, um, and I'll come up. Yeah,
Awesome.
at underscore Nick Biagini. Yeah.
And do you have any upcoming um, expos or anything that you're looking at doing in the near future?
Yeah, I just finished exhibiting at the JD Carrier Gallery. I'm also affiliated with a company called Hello Art Canada, and they take a lot of my paintings and they'll put them up in boardrooms and other like corporate buildings. And I do a lot of work with them. Plus, I have different like staging companies that use my work and will rent my work, pieces that I don't want to sell to exhibit them. But we'll see what September has to hold, in terms of um, anything up. I'm always involved in something. Whether I plan it or not, I'm always involved in something to do with art.
That's
Always.
good.
So
That's the most
yeah,
important, always.
yeah.
Awesome, Nick. Well, it's been great talking to you. Really, really look forward to continue working with you, obviously exposing your art in as many ways as possible. And then I'm looking forward to obviously having another conversation with you on different topics because I think you have some really relevant insight, not just within the art ecosystem, but also for young, young artists or young aspiring artists as well, which is really important. So yeah,
Beautiful. Thank you. It
thank you
was a
very
pleasure
much.
meeting you too, Gino.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I really enjoyed it and looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino.
Follow us to support our artists and join Plogix today if you are looking to gain exposure. We welcome all artists to apply to our gallery using the link in our bio.